You know, there are cold cases, and then there is, well, the cold case.
Oh, yeah. The ultimate one.
We are talking about a mystery that has haunted London and, let's be honest, the entire world for 137 years.
Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper. It is the definitive whodunit. It is the case that spawned 1,000 books, movies, endless conspiracy theories.
Definitely.
But I have a question for you listening right now. What if the answer hasn't been hiding in the shadows of Victorian London this whole time?
Right.
What if it hasn't been covered up by some, I don't know, massive Masonic conspiracy or the royal family?
Which are great stories, but
highly unlikely.
yeah.
What if the answer has actually just been sitting in a cardboard box of evidence since 2007?
And that is the huge question we are tackling today on this deep dive. It is a really bold claim.
Yeah, it is.
And it centers on a specific theory that has gained just a massive amount of traction over the last decade.
The Russell Edwards investigation.
Exactly. We are looking at the investigation led by author Russell Edwards, who claims he has definitively identified the killer. Definitively, as a Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski.
And when you say definitively, I mean, that is a really heavy word in the world of ripperology.
It's a forbidden word almost.
Right. Usually it all maybe and could be and possibly. But Edwards isn't just basing this on a hunch or some grainy photograph, is he?
No, not at all. We are looking at a really diverse stack of sources for this deep dive today.
Tell us about the stack.
Well, on one hand, we have modern forensic reports involving actual DNA analysis of a shawl found at one of the crime scenes.
The CSI stuff.
The CSI stuff, yeah. But we are balancing that with Victorian-era police memoranda, so documents written by the actual men who were hunting the Ripper on the ground.
Which is fascinating.
It is. And to complicate things even further, we have asylum records that give us a terrifyingly clear picture of our suspect's mental decline.
So it sounds like we have a bit of a showdown going on today.
We really do.
Because on one side, you have this, case closed claim based on molecular biology. And on the other side, you have historians and scientists waving giant red flags.
Shouting about contamination and inconclusive results. Exactly.
It is a classic clash between modern science and historical reality. And the stakes really couldn't be higher.
No, because if Edwards is right, the biggest mystery in criminal history is solved. Done.
And if he's wrong?
If he's wrong, we are just adding another layer of fog to Whitechapel.
Okay, well, let's unpack this. We have to start with the object that kicked this whole new investigation off.
The shawl.
The shawl. Because when I was reading through the source material for today, this is the very first thing that made me pause.
Really?
Yeah, because you mean to tell me there is a physical piece of evidence from a Jack the Ripper crime scene that just exists?
Allegedly, yes. This is our core artifact. It is a silk shawl that was reportedly found next to the body of the fourth victim,
Catherine Eddowes.
Catherine Eddowes, on September 30th, 1888.
September 30th. So that was the night of the double event, right?
Precisely. 2 murders in one night.
Elizabeth Stride was killed first.
Yes, and then Catherine Eddowes was found in Mitre Square less than an hour later.
Okay, so how does this shawl survive?
Well, the story goes that Acting Sergeant Amos Simpson was at the scene in Mitre Square.
Right.
And he reportedly saw this silk shawl lying in a pool of blood. He thought it was too fancy to belong to the victim, so he just decided to take it.
Okay, hold on. We have to address the elephant in the room here.
I know what you're going to say.
He is at a gruesome murder scene. By all accounts, Eddowes was mutilated horribly.
Beyond belief.
And he sees a blood-soaked shawl and thinks, you know what, this would make a great gift for my wife.
It sounds absolutely insane by modern standards, doesn't it?
It violates every ethical protocol we have.
Every single one. Honey, I brought you a present from the double homicide.
Just staggering.
But the story goes that he did take it home. And perhaps not surprisingly, his wife was absolutely horrified.
Well, I should certainly hope so.
She wanted nothing to do with it. She didn't want to wear a murder victim's shawl.
So what happened to it?
She shoved it in a drawer. And this is the crucial part of the lore for this evidence. It was never washed.
Never washed.
Never. It reportedly stayed in the family, passed down from generation to generation, just stored in boxes.
Until when?
Until Russell Edwards bought it at an auction in 2007.
Okay, so let me get this straight. For 126 years, this thing is just sitting in drawers.
Yes.
Being touched by kids, grandkids, auctioneers, and eventually Edwards himself.
Exactly. And that is exactly where the skepticism starts. But Edwards believed it was the key. He treated it like a crime scene that had been perfectly frozen in time.
Okay, so what did he do with it?
Between 2011 and 2014, he enlisted Dr. Juri Luhalainen.
And who is he?
He's a senior lecturer in molecular biology at Liverpool John Moores University. And they were looking for forensic evidence that might have somehow survived over a century.
And this is where it gets really interesting for you listening. Because they didn't just find dust mites and moth holes.
No.
They claim to have found actual biological material.
This was the huge aha moment. Eddowes claimed the analysis revealed two completely distinct types of stains.
Break those down for us.
First, using infrared photography, they found stains that were consistent with arterial blood splatter.
Arterial blood?
Yes, and they tested the mitochondrial DNA from that blood and found it matched a female descendant of Catherine Eddowes.
Okay, so that establishes, assuming the science holds up, that the shawl was actually at the scene.
Right.
Or at the very least, it has the victim's blood on it. But that doesn't actually tell us who killed her.
No, it just puts the shawl at the crime.
Yeah.
But then they used UV light.
And what did they find?
Under UV light, they found fluorescent stains, and they identified these specific stains as semen.
Semen on the shawl found next to the body.
Yes. And they tested the DNA from those semen stains.
And
Eddowes says the DNA matched a living descendant of Aaron Kosminski's sister.
wow. Okay, so let me just get this straight. You have blood that matches the victim.
Yes.
And semen that matches the prime suspect.
Right.
All in the exact same piece of Victorian fabric.
That is the claim.
That feels like a smoking gun.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, case closed, right? We can all pack up and go home.
Well, that is certainly how it was presented to the world in 2014. I mean, it made headlines globally. Jack the Ripper unmasked.
I remember seeing the articles.
It was huge. It was the very first time mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, was used to link a Ripper suspect to a victim. It really felt like science had finally caught up with history.
But I can hear the hesitation in your voice. You are getting ready to be the voice of reason here, aren't you?
I have to be. Because as compelling as that all sounds, when we look closely at our sources, the broader scientific community didn't exactly throw a parade.
They definitely did not. So if we connect this to the bigger picture of forensic science, there are some massive issues we need to talk about.
Two main issues, really: contamination and the actual limitations of mtDNA.
Let's start with contamination. We already mentioned the shawl was a family heirloom for over a century.
Right. It was not stored in a sealed, sterile evidence bag.
Not at all.
It was handled by the policeman, his wife, their children, their grandchildren. It was at an auction house where potential buyers could handle it. Eddowes himself handled it.
So the chain of custody is just completely shattered.
Utterly broken. So critics argue that the match might just be a bizarre coincidence of contamination.
Simply put, the DNA could have come from anyone who touched it in the last century.
It is a very distinct possibility, but even if we assume, just for argument's sake, that the DNA is genuinely from 1888.
Okay, let's assume that.
We still have to talk about what mitochondrial DNA actually is, because it is not like the nuclear DNA profiling you see on TV crime shows.
Right, it doesn't identify a unique, specific individual.
No. Nuclear DNA is your unique barcode. Nobody else has it.
Except an identical twin.
Right, except a twin. But mitochondrial DNA is passed down entirely from the mother to all her children, so it identifies a maternal line, not a single person.
Can you give us an analogy for that, just to make it clear?
Sure. Think of it like a surname, but a really common one.
Like Smith.
Exactly. If I find the name Smith at a crime scene, it could be John Smith. Or it could be his brother, Bob Smith.
Or his cousin on his mom's side.
Or his grandmother. It narrows the pool significantly, yes. But it is not a unique individual fingerprint.
So a match here just means the DNA could belong to Aaron Kosminski. Or his brother.
Exactly. Or any other relative sharing that exact maternal lineage.
Okay, I see the problem.
And here's where the critics really dig their heels in. The specific genetic mutation they found in that mtDNA is relatively common in people of European descent.
How common?
Well, some scientists argue that thousands of people in London at that time could have shared that exact same profile.
So statistically speaking, if you have a shawl handled by dozens of people over a century, finding a common European genetic marker isn't exactly finding a needle in a haystack.
That is the core argument against it. It is compelling that it matches Kosminski's line, especially since he was already a known police suspect.
Sure.
But it is not the mathematical certainty that nuclear DNA would provide. It puts Kosminski in the frame, but it doesn't lock the cell door.
Okay, so the science is highly debatable. It is flashy, it makes great headlines, but it has holes.
Big ones.
Let's pivot to the man himself then.
Mm.
Who was Aaron Kosminski? Because before this DNA test, I feel like he wasn't always the headline suspect in all the pop culture stuff.
True.
We usually see a top-hatted gentleman with a cane.
Pop culture loves the idea of a gentleman ripper, a wealthy doctor, or a member of the royal family.
It makes for a better movie.
It does. But when you look at the actual police work from the time, Kosminski checks a lot of boxes.
Who heavy?
He was a 23-year-old Polish Jewish immigrant, and he was living right in the heart of Whitechapel in 1888.
Right in the middle of the terror. And his profession, the source notes say he was a barber.
Yes, a working barber.
I want to put a pin in that because that barber detail feels really important when we talk about the weapon later.
Oh, it absolutely is.
But first, let's talk about his opportunity. Was he actually around when the murders happened?
The timeline is frighteningly accurate. The canonical 5 murders, the 5 women that everyone generally agrees were killed by the Ripper, happened between August 31st and November 9th, 1888.
And Kosminski.
During this exact window, he was completely free. He was living with his brother and his sisters right in the district. Geographically, he was walking the exact same streets as the victims.
But then the murders just stop. Mary Jane Kelly is killed in November 1888. And it is arguably the most gruesome, horrific scene of all.
Unimaginable.
And then silence. The autumn of terror just ends. If Kosminski was the killer, why did he just stop?
That is the gap that skeptics always point to. Kosminski wasn't permanently institutionalized until February 1891.
So that is more than 2 years later.
More than 2 years after the last canonical murder. So the question is, if he was this bloodthirsty maniac who escalated to butchering Mary Jane Kelly in her room,
why leave the women of Whitechapel alone for 2 whole years while he was still walking the streets?
Right. Serial killers don't usually just retire because they get bored.
They don't. They usually escalate until they are caught or they die.
Exactly. But the police at the time actually had a theory about this. And this brings us to the surveillance theory.
Tell us about that.
Sir Robert Anderson, who is a high-ranking police official, claimed that they absolutely knew who the Ripper was.
They knew?
They knew. They just couldn't prove it in a court of law. So the theory goes that Kosminski was kept under 24/7 surveillance at his brother's house.
So he was effectively under house arrest. The police were watching him so closely he physically couldn't slip out to commit another crime.
That is the claim they made. But it feels like a very convenient explanation, doesn't it?
It really does. Oh, we totally knew who he was. We just watched him until he went mad.
It sounds a lot like face-saving after the fact.
It does. But this moves us nicely from the modern DNA debate back to the Victorian detective work.
The paper trail.
Because when we dig into these historical files, it turns out Scotland Yard was actually very focused on this guy.
Whispering his name in the corridors. These weren't public announcements, to be clear. These were internal police memos.
But there are 3 key documents we need to look at, right?
Yes. 3 documents that suggest Kosminski was their guy all along. First, we have the Macnaghten Memoranda from 1894.
Okay.
Sir Melville Macnaghten explicitly named Kosminski as one of 3 prime suspects.
And what did he say about him in the memo?
He described him as having a great hatred of women and strong homicidal tendencies.
The fist.
He also noted that he had gone completely insane due to, and this is a quote, many years' indulgence in solitary vices.
Solitary vices. That is a very Victorian euphemism.
Very. It usually meant masturbation, which the medical community actually believed caused severe insanity back then.
Wow. Okay. What's the second document?
The Anderson Memoirs from 1910, Assistant Commissioner Sir Robert Anderson claimed the Ripper was a low-class Polish Jew.
But he didn't name Kosminski directly in the book.
He didn't use his name in the published text, no. He just said this suspect was unhesitatingly identified by a witness.
Which brings us to the third document. And I love this part of the story. It sounds like something straight out of a Sherlock Holmes novel.
It really is a historian's dream come true.
A clue hidden in the margins of a book found 100 years later.
Yes, the Swanson Marginalia, discovered in 1987. So someone finds an old copy of Sir Robert Anderson's memoirs.
The book we just mentioned.
Exactly. But this specific copy belonged to Chief Inspector Donald Swanson.
And who was he?
He was the man who actually led the Jack the Ripper investigation on the ground. And all throughout the margins of this book, Swanson has scribbled handwritten notes reacting to what Anderson wrote.
And he names names.
He does. Where Anderson writes about the Polish Jew, Swanson explicitly writes Kosminski in the margin. He confirms that Kosminski was the suspect.
And he details this massive dramatic confrontation, right? The seaside home identification.
Yes.
This is the part that really blew my mind reading the sources. Walk us through what happened there.
So according to Swanson's notes, the police took Kosminski to the seaside home, which was a police convalescent home down in Brighton.
So away from London.
Right. And they brought a witness there. Most historians believe this witness was a man named Israel Schwartz, who likely saw the physical attack on the third victim, Elizabeth Stride.
Okay, so they have their prime suspect and their star witness in the same room. What happens?
The witness looks at Kosminski and identifies him, unhesitatingly. He says, "That is the man."
So they have him. They have a positive ID from an eyewitness. Why didn't he hang?
Because the witness, point blank, refused to testify in court.
Refuse.
Swanson writes that the witness refused to swear to him.
Why? I mean, that makes no sense. You are staring at the monster who is terrorizing your city.
You really have to understand the intense cultural context of 1888.
Okay, set the scene for us.
The witness, Schwartz, was Jewish. Kosminski was Jewish. At that specific time, anti-Semitism in the East End of London was an absolute powder keg.
Because of the murders?
Largely, yes. There were already riots happening. People were openly blaming the Jewish immigrant community for the Ripper's crimes.
Tensions were incredibly high.
Sky high. Now, looking at our sources, we have to report this impartially as the historical reality of their reasoning. The witness allegedly told police that he did not want to be the one responsible for sending a fellow Jew to the gallows.
Because he thought it would make things worse.
Exactly. He knew that if a Jewish man was publicly hanged as Jack the Ripper, it could spark a massive, violent pogrom against their entire community in London.
Wow. So it wasn't about protecting a killer. It was entirely about protecting an innocent community from a deadly backlash.
That is exactly what Swanson's notes imply. It was a terrible moral dilemma with massive consequences. And Swanson claims that because this witness wouldn't go on the record, the police had absolutely no legal grounds to charge Kosminski.
And that is why they supposedly switched to the surveillance strategy.
Yes. Watch him until we can put him away for something else, or until he loses his mind.
So if we look at the board now, we have the DNA pointing to him, albeit with caveats.
All right.
And we have the head of the investigation writing his name in the margins of a book, claiming they caught him but couldn't prosecute.
It is starting to look like an open and shut case.
It really is.
Yeah.
But nothing with Jack the Ripper is ever that simple.
Never. And this brings us to the real problem, the problem of the profile.
The profile paradox.
We have to step back and ask, does Aaron Kosminski actually fit the profile of the man who committed these specific crimes?
Right. Let's talk about the skill debate. Yeah. Because I remember reading that some doctors at the time thought the Ripper had actual surgical knowledge.
Yes, very specific anatomical knowledge. Dr. Phillips, who examined the bodies, noted that organs, like the kidney taken from Catherine Eddowes, were removed with remarkable speed and precision.
Meaning he wasn't just hacking away.
He suggested the killer knew exactly where to cut. He knew human anatomy.
But Kosminski was a barber. Does a 19th century barber know where a kidney is?
And that is the fierce debate. In the 19th century, barbers used straight razors.
Which is the exact type of weapon used in the murders.
Exactly. They were very comfortable with blades. They were completely comfortable with blood. The history of the barber-surgeon suggests there was at least a historical link between the trades.
So he definitely had the manual dexterity. He knew how to slice efficiently.
He certainly knew how to cut deeply and quickly. And skeptics of the whole surgeon theory argue that the mutilations weren't actually precise surgery.
They were just brutal.
They were just incredibly fast. A barber, or even a local butcher, might have enough general rough knowledge to rip an organ out if they weren't being careful about the surrounding blood vessels.
Wait, would a barber know how to do that in the dark? Because we have to remember, these crimes happened in unlit backyards and alleyways.
Sure.
We are talking pitch black Victorian smog.
That is the strongest counterargument. The official post-mortem for Eddowes stated the killer had a good deal of knowledge as to the position of the organs.
In the dark.
In the dark. Could a poor, untrained barber living in squalor pull off a surgical extraction in the dark in a matter of 5 minutes?
It is a massive stretch.
It is a huge stretch for a lot of historians.
And then there is his mental state. This is where those asylum records we mentioned come in.
Yeah.
We know he died in an asylum.
He did. He spent the last couple decades of his life locked away in institutions like Colney Hatch and Leavesden.
What condition was he in?
Horrific. He died in 1919 weighing only 96 pounds.
96 pounds. That's severely emaciated.
He was wasting away.
Yeah.
And the medical records describe him as demented and incoherent.
Okay.
They called him apathetic and harmless. He completely refused to wash himself. He ate discarded food straight out of the gutters.
Why?
Because he was deeply paranoid about being poisoned by the staff.
See, this is the massive contradiction for me. This is the paradox. The Ripper was organized in a terrifying way. He successfully lured victims, killed them silently without raising the alarm, completely evaded heavily stepped-up police patrols, and vanished without a single trace.
Every single time.
Does that sound like a man who eats garbage from the street and can't even hold a coherent conversation?
That is the million-dollar question for you listening. Could a man in a state of severe, untreated mental decline, hearing voices totally incoherent, possess the laser focus and clarity to execute these stealthy, high-stakes murders?
It doesn't seem to fit.
Or does the absolute sheer brutality of the crimes, the frenzy of the mutilations, actually perfectly match someone suffering from those solitary vices and intense auditory hallucinations?
It is a terrifying thought either way. Was the Ripper a cold, calculating surgeon or a chaotic, disorganized madman?
Kosminski definitely fits the disorganized madman profile perfectly.
But the crimes themselves seem to require the cold calculation of the former.
And that is exactly why the experts remain so fiercely divided today. The modern DNA suggests it's him.
The Victorian police files suggest it's him.
But the psychological profile leaves us wondering if a man that profoundly sick could pull off crimes that elusive.
So where does that leave us? Russell Edwards says it is unequivocally solved. He says the shawl proves it.
Well, if you look at the synthesis of all our sources today, the case against Aaron Kosminski has two massive pillars holding it up.
Summarize them for us.
You have the modern scientific claim, which is undeniably intriguing, but, as we discussed, comes with massive asterisks regarding contamination and mtDNA statistics.
Right, the surname analogy.
Exactly. And then you have the historical certainty of the police. McNaughton, Anderson, Swanson, they were absolutely sure he was the guy.
They were sure, but they never actually got a conviction.
Never did. The match is perfect in terms of geography. He was right there. It matches the weapon, a barber straight razor. But the mental state is the giant stumbling block.
It feels like we are closer than we have ever been, but there's still that persistent shadow of doubt. It feels like we are trying to force a puzzle together, where half the pieces are from a lab in 2014 and the other half are from an alleyway in 1888.
Yeah.
And they just don't quite lock in.
I think that is the inherent nature of this case. Even with cutting-edge DNA, history is incredibly messy. We cannot cross-examine the witness from the seaside home.
We can't.
We cannot test the shawl in a pristine, sterile lab in 1888. We are just left with probabilities, not certainties.
It really makes you wonder about that witness, though, the one who refused to testify. That single decision literally changed history.
It absolutely did. If he had testified, Kosminski would have hung, and we probably wouldn't be recording this deep dive today.
Well, here's a provocative thought to leave you with, to mull over on your own.
Let's hear it.
The entire police story relies on this idea that they completely caught him, but a witness's moral dilemma prevented a trial.
Yes.
It is a tragic, almost noble reason for the case remaining officially open.
It is. It frames the police as highly competent but tragically hamstrung by circumstance.
But ask yourself this. If the police were truly watching him 24/7, and they were so completely convinced he was the monster ripping women apart in the streets,
Yeah.
why does the official file technically remain open to this day? Was that witness refusal really the only thing standing between the mystery and a conviction? Or was that dramatic story just a highly convenient way for the police to explain away their absolute failure to catch the most notorious killer in history?
Oh, wow.
Maybe Scotland Yard needed a scapegoat just as much as the terrified public needed an answer?
That is a very uncomfortable question. And it suggests that maybe the real mystery isn't just about who the killer was, but about how much the police actually knew or covered up.
And that is one secret we might never uncover. That is all for this deep dive into the Whitechapel mystery. Thanks for listening.